And now we jump to Act 3, Scene 1. So, Viola, as Cesario, is on her way to see Olivia, and she first encounters the fool, but then she encounters Sir Toby and Sir Andrew. Olivia, meeting Cesario, sends the other ways and declares her love, ultimately at the end. But at the very beginning of this, we see Viola talking to the fool, and the fool's trying to understand who this Cesario is and why he's there and why he's always coming to Olivia's, uh, I guess, court. What is it? That what exactly is he doing? Um, it must be call from Orsino. Why is he doing this? Um, and that's ultimately how that conversation works out. It's just overall, who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing? And just a lot of questions. And then here comes Sir Toby and Sir Andrew, and they want to know who this young page is. So that is what they are ultimately asking. Like, how are you, and why are you coming to my house or my niece's house? And Viola says, "Well, I am bound to your niece, sir. I mean, she is the list of my voyage." And so Toby says, "Well, but why? Like, why do you go?" Um, he's never really given an answer, and I don't think that he really likes that. But then Olivia comes in with Maria, and that just goes to show how excited Olivia is. So Andrew and Viola and Olivia are all talking, and Andrew is trying to be as cool and suave as possible, but ultimately it's just Olivia and Viola left. And Olivia said, "What is your name?" "Cesario is your servant's name, fair princess." "My servant, sir, 'twas never merry world since lowly feigning was called compliment. Your servant to the Count Orsino, youth, and he is yours, and his must needs be yours. Your servant's servant is your servant, madam. For him I think not on him, for his thoughts would they were blanks rather than filled with me. Madam, I come to whet your gentle thoughts on his behalf." So Viola's going back and she's explaining to Olivia, "I'm here on behalf of Orsino. That is why I'm here. I am not here for any other reason." And Olivia says, "Oh, well, I bade you never speak again of him." So she's like, "I'm not interested. I don't want to get to know him. I don't want to know why he sent you. I want to know you. Give me leave, beseech you. I did send after the last enchantment you did here. I didn't send for Orsino. I sent for you. A ring in chase of you. So did I abuse myself, my servant, and I fear me you under your hard construction must I sit, to force that on you in a shameful cunning which you knew none of yours." So she's just saying, that ring, yes, okay, I did it. It's me. I made the ring because I wanted to make sure that you were coming back. And this is kind of how I baited you to come back to my court. Whoops. Oops, 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 oops. There we go. And whoops. I've lost my page here. Oop, because I went way too far up. Let's see. There I am. So Viola asks Cesario, just like, "I pity you." And Olivia says, "Well, that's a degree to love. You know, um, you pitying me, at least that's something. Like, you know, at least you're moving along." And she says, "Why then methinks 'tis time to smile again." So Olivia says, like, I can be happy, and that's perfectly fine, and I can be happy with you. I don't want to be happy with Orsino. I want to be happy with you. And Viola says, "You'll nothing, madam, to my lord by me." And Olivia says, "Stay, I prithee, tell me what thou thinkst of me." And Viola says, "That you do think you are not what you are." And Olivia says, "Well, if I think so, I think the same of you." And Viola says, "Then think you right. I am not what I am." So she's trying to let Olivia know, you are not my type. Like, you're not my type. It's never going to happen. And, you know, just stop. But Olivia just doesn't want to stop. And it comes down to the point of where Cesario has to end up leaving, and she ends up going in a completely different direction than Olivia. So then we have Act 2, Scene 3, where Sir Andrew, convinced that Olivia will never love him, threatens to leave, and Toby persuades him that he can win her love if he challenges Cesario to a duel. Sir Andrew goes off to prepare a letter for Cesario, and Maria enters to say that Malvolio has followed every point in her letter and is about to incur disaster when he appears before Olivia. So this one's kind of interesting. I love this scene because, you know, Andrew has now come to the conclusion it's never going to happen. I'm never going to get hurt. And, you know, Toby, in his last attempt to try to save what he has, he says, no, no, there is a way for you to, kind of grasp Olivia in your the palms of your hands if you do something that shows your manliness. And he says, challenge me the court's youth to fight with him, hurt him in 11 places. My niece shall take note of it, and assure thyself there is no love broker in the world can more prevail in man's commendation with woman than rapport of valor. There is no better man in this world than one that shows how strong and, you know powerful he is. And Fabian agrees and says, well, there's no way but this, Sir Andrew. And Toby says, "We just," because Andrew says, "Will either of you bear me a challenge to him?" Because Andrew doesn't want to do it himself. He doesn't want to do anything. He wants somebody else to help him or somebody else to do it for him. And Toby's like, "Well, just instead of just challenging him like man to man, just say, go write him a letter and tell him that you are, challenging him to a duel, like kind of like a meet me out behind the dumpster at 3 o'clock type situation." So ultimately, they go back and forth, Andrew and Toby, and Andrew ultimately leaves to go write this letter. And Fabian and Toby start talking, and ultimately, Fabian he knows exactly what Toby's doing. He knows that without Andrew, Toby will not have what he wants and what he needs, and he needs Andrew there to set him up, like have his life be what he wants it to be. And then around line 65, Maria comes into the scene, and she is so excited, and she runs over to Toby and she's like, "Oh, it's about to happen." She said, "If you desire the spleen and will laugh yourselves into stitches, follow me. Malvolio is turned heathen, a very renago, for there is no Christian that means to be saved by believing rightly can ever believe in such impossible passages of grossness. He is in yellow stockings," Toby says, "and he's cross-guarded." And Maria says, "Most villainously, like a pedant that keeps a school, the church. I have dogged him like his murderer. He does obey every point of the letter that I dropped to betray him. He does smile his face into more lines than is the new map with the augmentation of the Indies." So she is just thrilled. Malvolio is about to make a complete jerk out of himself, and she couldn't be happier. He has followed the letter to an absolute T. Toby thinks it's fantastic, so they're just going to go get the popcorn and just sit and wait and watch it all happen. So, Act 3, Scene 3. Antonio, having followed Sebastian, explains what happened a long time before and why he is not allowed in Illyria. And he says, Sebastian says, "Well, I don't know what's troubled you in the past, but you can always talk to me. We can work for it out." Um, and Antonio just says, and he tries to tell him, "I do not walk without dangers with these streets. Once in a sea fight against the Count, his galleys, I did some service, of such note indeed, that were I taken here, he would be scarce be answered." And he said, the offense is not of such a bloody nature. I'll bet the quality of the time and quarrel might well have given us bloody argument. It might have since been answered in repaying what we took from them, which for traffic's sake most of our city did. Only myself stood out, for which if I be lapsed in this place, I shall pay dear. So he basically says it wasn't anything terrible, but if I show my face around here, I am definitely going to be in big trouble. And instead, Antonio gives Sebastian his bag with all of Antonio's money in it, and he says, "Here you go. I'm just going to hang out here kind of keep quiet and everything else while you're going out and kind of looking at everything. And Sebastian says, "Well, why are you giving me your bag?" And Antonio says, "Well, if you see something that you want, just go ahead and get it." And Sebastian says, "Well, okay, I'll hold on to it and I'll be back in an hour." And that is that. That is Act 3, Scene 3. Act 3, Scene 4. Oh, it's Malvolio. He's dressed ridiculously and he's smiling grotesquely, and he appears before Olivia. She thinks that he's crazy and puts him in the care of Sir Toby, who decides to treat him as a madman by having him bound and put in a dark room. Toby also decides to deliver Andrew's challenge to Cesario in person in order to force the two of them into a duel. Terrified, they prepare to fight. At the moment, Antonio enters. He thinks that Cesario is Sebastian and comes to his defense. Antonio is immediately arrested by Orsino's officers. Since he is sure that Viola is Sebastian, Antonio is bitter about the denial of their friendship. Viola is herself delighted by Antonio's angry words because since he called her Sebastian, there is hope that her brother may be in fact be alive. So the scene begins with Olivia and Maria, and Olivia is just talking about how, wonderful Cesario is, and, you know, how much she adores him and everything else, and but how he is kind of, denying her advances. So she calls for Malvolio. She says, "Maria, go get him. Um, maybe he can cheer me up." And here comes Malvolio, and he says, "Sweet lady, ho." And she says, "Smilest thou? I sent for thee upon a sad occasion. Like, why are you smiling? I called for you because I need you to cheer me up. But why are you smiling?" He said, "Sad? I could be sad. This does make some obstruction in the blood, this cross gartering, but what of that? If it please the eye of one, it is with me as the very sonnet of the very true sonnet is please one and please all." And Olivia's like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" And Malvolio just goes on to kind of talk about like the little things that were inside of the letter. And Olivia kind of thinks that Malvolio must be like sick. And he says, "Well, oh, sweetheart, I come to thee." And Olivia's like, "Well, why are you smiling and why are you kissing my hand?" And Maria says, "Well, what are you like, kind of, how do you, Malvolio? Like, what are you doing?" Malvolio said, "At your request, yes, nightingales answered daws." And Maria says, "Well, what appear you with this ridiculous boldness before my lady?" And Malvolio starts to quote the letter, and Olivia has no idea what he's talking about. And he's again quoting, "Remember who commended thy yellow stockings?" And Olivia says, "The yellow stockings, the cross gartered. Am I maid? Why is this the midsummer madness?" Like he just sits, she's saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I you have gone crazy. What is with you?" And the servant comes and says, or interrupts Malvolio's kind of, I guess, delusions or of thinking that Olivia loves him. And, well, actually, no, it's not really delusions as he was so much manipulated and pretty much gaslit by Maria. Um, but the servant comes and says, "Oh, the gentleman at Count Orsino's is returned, and he attends your lady's pleasure." And Olivia says, "Well, I'll come to him." She says, "Maria, go get Toby. Go get Toby and have Toby take Malvolio somewhere to be looked at because Malvolio's obviously not well and I need him to be well and I need Toby to kind of do that for me." And Malvolio is now kind of confused. Like he doesn't understand because he read this letter. It was written from Olivia, and now she's saying that she has no idea what he's talking about. So then here comes Toby, and he ends up talking about how Malvolio is crazy. So he's telling you, he's like, "Oh, what's this madness? Who are you? Like, are you possessed?" And Maria says, "Oh, but Toby, we need you, or my lady prays you to have care of him." So Toby, Olivia wants you to make sure that Malvolio's okay. And Malvolio says, "I don't under, again, he's so confused and he doesn't understand." And Toby is talking to Fabian and Maria back and forth, and they're sitting there taunting Malvolio, talking basically as if he wasn't there about how crazy he is. And ultimately, they take Malvolio down to a dungeon of sort, to basically hold Malvolio there. This is also this is what Maria wants, because with Malvolio gone, she has more rule over Olivia. So the thing is like Maria and Toby, they think that they kind of rule over the castle and that they can manipulate and everything to get what they want. Fortunately, it does not work out for them, but it does leave a lot of casualties along the way. Malvolio being a big one. Like, instead he's going to an asylum because everybody now thinks that he's crazy. So Olivia and Cesario are having conversation, and she's saying, I love you. You're the one that I want to be with. And Viola tries to give Olivia the jewel from Orsino, and she doesn't want it. Um, and she says, and she says, "Take back the jewel. I don't want the jewel." And she says, "But it's from your true love for my master." And Olivia doesn't want it. And she says, "Well, I'm giving this jewel to you." And says that, we'll talk again tomorrow. So it was a really quick, instance. Um, just poor Olivia just can't she can't take a clue at all. And then it goes back, and then as Viola is leaving, dressed as Cesario, she encounters Toby. And Toby has decided that he is going to defend his friend and challenge, he is, I guess, relaying the message that Andrew is challenging Cesario to a duel. And Cesario has no idea why, and he even says right here around line 251, "I am no fighter. I have heard of I have heard of some kind of men that put quarrels purposefully on others to taste their valor. Belike this is the man of that quirk." So he said, I'm not a fighter, but this is kind of coming across to me like you guys are trying to do this intentionally, just to show that you're so manly. Um, and it just goes back and forth. And Viola again keeps saying, "Well, I don't understand why do you want to fight me so bad for? This is kind of stupid. I'm not interested in Olivia. Um, so there's really no reason for us to fight." So then Viola's kind of trying to find out some more information from Fabian. And then Toby and Andrew enter back again because Toby has ran off to go scamper and get Andrew. That way Andrew can fight Cesario. And while doing so, let's see here. "Pray God defend me. A little thing would tell me how much I lack of a man." Toby crosses to Andrew. "Come, Sir Andrew, there's no remedy. The gentleman will, for his honor's sake, have one bout with you." Um, so he's saying the duel will happen. Andrew draws his sword. Viola, dressed as Cesario, draws her sword. And she's like, "Fine, this is against my will, but I guess if I have to do this, I have to do this." And then here comes Antonio, and he comes running in, and he looks at Andrew, and he says, "Put up your sword. If this young gentleman has done offense, I take the fault on me. If you offend him, I for him defy you." Saying, like, no, if you want to fight somebody, fight me. I'll I'll fight you on behalf of my friend. Um, and Toby says, "Well, what are you? Who are you? Where'd you come from?" And Antonio says, "One, sir, that for his love dares yet do more than you have heard him brag to you he will." And Toby says, "Well, okay, well, I'll draw my sword," as Antonio draws his. He says, "Nay, if you be an undertaker, I am here for you." So they start to get ready to battle, and then here comes some officers, and the officers come in and they say, "Oh, that man, we need to arrest that man." And they go over to grab Antonio. And he says, "Antonio, I arrest thee at the suit of Count Orsino." And Antonio says, "Well, you do mistake me, sir." And the officer says, "No, sir, no jot. I know your favor well, though now you have no sea cap on your head. Take him away. He knows I know him well." So he says, "I must obey." And then he looks at Viola, who is dressed as Cesario, who looks like Sebastian, and says, "This comes with seeking you, but there's no remedy. I shall answer it. What will you do? Now my necessity makes me for ask you for my bag. It grieves me so much more for what I cannot do for you than what befalls myself." Like, so he says, I need my money back. And Viola's just kind of standing there, and the officer's like, "Well, come on, come on." And Antonio looks to Viola again. He says, I need some of that money." And she says, "Well, what money, sir? For the fair kindness you have shown me here, and part being prompted by your present trouble, out of my lean and low ability, I'll lend you something. Like, I don't know what bag you're talking about, but I'll give you some money if you need." And Antonio says, "Will you deny me now? Is it possible that my deserts to you can lack persuasion? Do not tempt my misery, or my deserts, excuse me. To you can lack persuasion. Do not tempt my misery, lest that it make me sound so unsound a man as to upbraid you with those kindnesses that I have done for you." And Viola says, "I know of none. Like, nor I know you by voice or any feature." So Antonio says, "Well, why are you doing this? You're supposed to be my friend." And Viola says, "Well, I don't know who you are. I don't know your voice. I don't know your face. I don't know anything about you." And Antonio's just beside himself, and he is so upset because his best friend has denied his knowing of him. And then Antonio says, "But oh, how vile and idle proves this God. Thou hast, Sebastian, done good feature shame. In nature there's no blemish but the mind." And it goes on to the first officer, and he's getting mad, and he grabs up Antonio. He's telling him, you know, he's basically thinking that Antonio has gone mad. Here's Antonio talking to this gentleman, and this gentleman has no idea who Antonio is. So, I mean, ultimately, somebody would consider him to be mad. And then Viola looks to the audience and she says, "Methinks his words do from such passion fly that he believes himself. So do not I. Prove true imagination. Oh, prove true that I, dear brother, be now taken from you." And then he reminds and he says, so he names Sebastian. "I my brother know, yet living in my glass, even such and so. And favor was my brother, and he went, still in this fashion, color ornament, for him I imitate. Oh, if it prove tempest or kindness, salt wave fresh in love." So now she knows. She knows that Sebastian is alive. And then she, leaves. Toby, Fabian, Andrew are there, and they have now definitely hatched the plan that they are going to fight Cesario, and hopefully it's going to be a fight to the death. But as they have now, it's beyond just showing his love for Viola through a quarrel. It's full on. He challenged my manhood. Now we've got to destroy him.